Therefore, we've got one of the more important sessions for today, and we congratulate Malmo on the number of participants. Surely you've got a story to tell, and we look forward to that story. And I'm giving it to Oscar to introduce his partners.
Okay, thank you very much, Helmi. We have the doubtful privilege of being the last today, this afternoon, and in addition to that, we have a 90-minute session. But as you can see, we are 7 presenters, so that we hope that hopefully that you can enjoy parts of it at least. And we come from Malmö, and as you may know, Malmö is the third largest city in Sweden. It's right in the south, opposite Copenhagen, in one of the more dynamic regions of Europe, actually. And but in spite of being the third largest city, Malmö hasn't had a university until 15 years ago, and that's due to the fact that we are only 20 kilometers from Lund, which is the largest university in Scandinavia. But now we have university since 1998, actually, and 2 years later we got the bridge over to Copenhagen, and both these events have been immensely important for Malmö. Now, and the year 2000 is also when the Communication for Development Master Program started. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but just to make a presentation of my colleagues here. We start in the back here. Anders Höghansen, who is a senior lecturer at the program since 2006 or 5 or 6 or so. He's Danish, and on his side is Tobias Denskus, the most the most recent part of the crew. He actually started less than a year ago, and he's German. And to the far left is the webmaster who's been working with me on this program all the way since its inception. At the time, he was an interaction design student at Malmö University. He's from Sweden, from the region of Skåne, the northeastern part of Skåne. And beside him is Linda Karlsson, who is our very special librarian, who has also been working with the program since the start. And the two last, the ladies here on my left, are students program. Barbara Neuer Howell Nussbaumer, who is German as well, but living in Mozambique, and she has followed the program from Mozambique. She'll tell you about that experience. She only very recently graduated from the program. And Ulrika, who is Swedish, and who joined the program a few years ago and then had a break for doing some work and other things that some of our students do, but then recently came back to finish the program. So she's a current student of the program. Okay, so maybe I'll switch to that microphone now. The Communication for Development program was started in 2000, and it is, as it says here, an international program. So we have, and it's web-based. So we have students from all over the world. This picture, it's quite unusual that we have so many present. But this was taken last year at the Eurocom Festival in September, which is, by the way, will be also the event that will host the local classroom event this year. But normally, most of the students are actually present online. But we have also presence in the room, and that is important. So, right. Oh, okay. Yeah, of course, I can see. So, very briefly, the history. We started in 2000, and it's important that from the outset, the idea was to make a course that was cutting edge, both in terms of content and so first in terms of content, to combine, to rethink communication development, both communication and development in the light of globalization, which really was a process that put many things. The first two courses were in Swedish. They were experimental pilot courses, but the concept has more or less been the same. First international course was given in 2002. And I think the most important thing about this time is to see that this coincides with the enormous technological development with the Web 2.0. So, for example, on the first international courses, let's say also that from the outset we had this combination of in seminars in real life and web-based communication, which in the beginning was completely asynchronous because there was no way of streaming. We started streaming. We made the first attempt at streaming at a seminar in Sarajevo in 2003 on a modem, and it was quite shaky. But from 2004, we have streamed all seminars. Also, I mean, at quite poor quality in the beginning, and especially in the first years, we had serious problems with our African students who couldn't even follow on a chat. But from, let's say, I don't know when, but I mean, now technology has improved so much, so it's not really a problem anymore. But another important thing is also that since it has followed the development, but it has all the time been adapted to the user's needs rather than being developed at a technological level. And for many years, the program actually served before social media were around. The core sites of Common in a way really served as social media. This is a map showing the hits on the Common portal since its inception in 2010, and as you can see, it also quite well reflects where our students are. As you can see, it appears to be quite Eurocentric, and unfortunately, it has become more Eurocentric since 2010, when Sweden introduced tuition fees for non-European students. Before that, all university education was free for anyone from anywhere. But you can see here that there are some regional hubs, and Southern and Eastern Africa are two of them where we have had in these years a strong presence. Countries that we have had to date 8 or 9 graduates from South Africa, and then to Zimbabwe, and many from Kenya. So many. Yeah. And you can see also that, and to date, 200 graduates, more or less, that have from the program, and at present, some 100 students. We have some 400, 500 applicants here. The 50-50 Swedish international ratio is, now we have a tendency to have more Swedish students, but if we look at those who have graduated, then the ratio has. So we have, and especially we've had a strong African presence, although not so much now. Now we have African students, but not on the continent, but African students who are present. We hope that this will change. And these are some of the guiding principles that have been, that still are leading. As I said, in terms of content, a rethinking of communication. And in terms of pedagogy, pedagogy based on group dynamic, on really potentiating the enormous resource that the students, the participants, and then finally also to have a practical component and ending up which not necessarily has to be as there are some maybe at the most 10, 15 universities all in the world who are giving education, and wealth is one of them. And the difference between our take on content and most of the others is that we have a very broad understanding. Some of them are very hands-on in terms of really communication for development, health communication, implementing communication in pre-project. Whereas we have a broader understanding of combat as an interdisciplinary field of both practice and analysis. It's just as important to analyze and understand what's happening to actually go in and try to change it. And actually to move away from the still common dichotomy of north, south, and developed and developing countries, and seeing really, and this is where competition comes in, seeing really development as a transition process that includes our, that is concept of world development, which is by Dutch sociologist Jan Erik Petersen. And now we come to the title of this presentation, Convergence Pedagogy, which is a concept that we have recently coined for this particular form of blended teaching and learning, which is web-based but structured around seminars and following a timeline, just as any campus. And this is really because usually, often when you talk about distance learning web-based, it is really very much centered on the individual and his or her interaction with the tutor. But whereas we emphasize maximizing interaction between lecturers and students and among students, as in a classroom setting. And another really important issue is accessibility, which has been a struggle for us, especially in the first years, to always go for having offering low-tech solutions or various bandwidth options in order to level out differences in an uneven connected world. And this ever-present learning environment, which is based on group dynamics and which potentiates participants' own resources, that is what we describe as. And here are just some quotes that I read through briefly. They from a survey that we made very recently to actually get some as a form of our self quality assurance process. And it's very striking that in the comments from these are graduates from some of them from early on and some fresh graduates. And what is striking is that all the time the very positive comments on the technology and the use of technology. And also, that's also part of the concept, actually, to also be mobile. In principle, all we need is a computer and a camera and the stable internet connection in order to go anywhere and listen. Over the years, Mickey has developed this, and so now he would use 3 cameras and quite more heavy equipment, but still, we are mobile. And as you can see here, normally we do our seminars in Malmö, but when we have had the chance through some form of collaboration, we have done seminars at other places. In Sarajevo, 2003, Istanbul, Durban, South Africa in 2006, Dar es Salaam, and last year both in Bangalore and Berlin. And then now this year, as part of this project, we are here now in Stellenbosch, and in addition to these 2 days, actually we will do a thematic concept seminar in Cape Town on Friday. If you want to see our working practice at our labs in Bridgetown, and then May in Guelph, and Malmö in September, and Flinders in November. And then eventually we'll sum up everything in some kind of workshop. Have to work out later. And just very brief to show you some of this, I'm sure you're familiar with this. This is uh, the WordPress blog, which is common for all the and where this there's a broadcasting. So this is where you can follow. We have the content portal, which is our main uh, uh, forum for community. Right, vivid forum for discussion on things that are happening. This is our former web mag, which is now an open journal, and well, it doesn't look very nice, but there's a lot of interesting content up to date issues. Starting in 2005, and another one coming up quite soon. And finally, this is EURECOM, which is a transnational, binational center for communication and global change that we are running in collaboration with Roskilde University on the Danish side. And what we've been doing, we are in the process of building a research organization in the world. And what we've done so far is, for example, organizing these so-called EURECOM festivals on the themes that I give you here. And what is interesting here is the last one that will be in September 2015, Voice and Matter, because that is the one somehow being coordinated with local classroom part, the Malmö part of the local classroom program. Yes, well, I'm going to say a few words about the field of communication development, which I think is living a moment of momentum now after perhaps it's going up and down, and after some years of perhaps decline, you can see that there is a very wide, a growing interest at many levels, and I think mainly due to three factors. One, the ongoing restructuring of the world, and as consequence of that, the growing number of South-South partnerships. And of course, last but not least, the social media which is very circumstances. But finally, before giving the word to Tobias, I'll show apart from, yes, this is a demonstration of how this works.
And Bojana just came over from Copenhagen, and we are all here in Malmö. So now 1 minute past 3, and I'm passing over to Jackie, who has the other president. Today is really the president. It worked very well. So Jackie.
Thank you very much. It's great to be online ever. And I like how you adapted to fit your semi-structured interviews by favoring the face-to-face conversations and moving away from the more formally structured questionnaire type interviews. But I'm wondering how you dealt with this issue in your semiotic analysis. If you found a solution to situating that tool more in the culture.
I'm not sure I did, to be perfectly honest. And you know, I think that's a fair point. I would also say, though, that perhaps what the semiotic analysis gives you is more of a framework that is easily replicable. I mean, what would be a very interesting dimension would be to kind of culturally locate it. But I think that's probably for another bit of work for somebody who's you know, who's interested in that.
Yeah, what you saw now disappear, but we had the examinee in Nairobi and the commentator in Edmonton, Canada. So we had a kind of
But I will not use more time. Run out of time.
Yeah, thank you, Oscar. I probably prefer to move around a little bit, so I will keep the mic in hand. Before our dinner turns into a major diplomatic affair, Barbara is not German. She is from Austria, which is, you know, the small country next to Germany. So one of the very unique things about ComDev in Malmö is that right from the beginning, it had links to the interaction design program, which is also part of the K3, the culture, arts and communication faculty. And I think that is a unique way of designing a course program. It's a unique way of thinking about the process, the setup, and not just thinking about sort of platforms and contents and learning. And Mika will obviously go into this much more in detail. So our ComDev approach was in the context of interaction design. So the idea, and in some ways, is to sort of have students that are sort of thoughtful designers in the broadest sense. When it comes to processes, they engage in their work processes. When it comes into their, let's call them products, communication products, many of our students are professionals who work in NGOs, INGOs, or UN organizations. But also when it obviously comes to the broader social content about social change and sustainable change. And I think what's really worked well over the years is that the pedagogical foundation that interaction design uses, sort of that Bauhaus model that's behind all of it, has really influenced the way that ComDev is operated. The interdisciplinary teamwork, I mean, it's not just nationalities, but it's also that, you know, we have backgrounds in anthropology, development studies, cultural studies, journalism, interaction design. That right from the beginning, we also try to have a different representation. So it's not just communication, media, or development, but that's a broad way of perceiving ComDev in the studio atmosphere. The practitioner-student-teacher dialogue, I think, is also something that's very unique, and I think Oscar provided a very good example of how this kind of works on the practical level, seminars. You know, that you have students joining us on different levels, that we have academic colleagues, the broad network. We saw Bojana, who's an academic colleague based in Denmark. So we have all those interactions and dialogues. And we have really a classroom that is more of a studio. And I think that's also something that really kind of makes ComDev special. And I think Helen, more importantly, hinted to that it makes ComDev expensive. And I think some of what we heard today, the idea that whether it's MOOCs or other online education is often kind of an idea to introduce savings to university, will probably backfire for many of those. Because what we are having is a very, it is very staff intensive. You saw the examination seminar, so you not only have someone like Mika who's sort of constantly there with often with the help of another colleague, but you easily have 2 or 3 other colleagues in the room, and Anders will talk about chats that we are moderating and facilitating during the seminars. So you may end up that a normal lecture can easily use 3 or 4 person staff time. If it's done well, if it's engaging, if you want students to come stick around and come back, it's going to be a staff-intensive affair that really needs to be thought through. Slides. So again, what is driving interaction design and other design practices, sort of the link between the user-centered design, the student-centered learning, and the communication for sustainable change, is really what we are trying to create in our student classroom. The new media and ICT course is a very good example, where we are also kind of moving from, surface learning, from learning practical skills, learning something in a classroom that is taught in a more traditional way, with the kind of deep learning that really triggers some of these reflections. So the new Media and ICT course combines very practical exercise, how to manage a WordPress blog. And again, there are lectures, there are practical tutorials, but sort of on that surface, it is about setting up and maintaining a blog. But once sort of students in groups start to engage in their practice, writing blog posts, sharing blog posts, commenting on blog posts, it's sort of creating something that is not an academic paper per se. They also have to write a short academic reflection, but having another form of interaction, often sort of creates interesting insights. So we just had a seminar where students presented their blog. And on some blogs, there were interesting images around sort of, I think it was around sort of presenting Africa in a very broad sense. And it was a very interesting discussion that, some students kind of felt that the images may not have been sort of the best or most appropriate to really convey the message of social change. And some of the students started discussing, it's like, well, to be honest, I'm now realizing that this is actually what I'm doing in my professional practice as a communication officer in my organization. So I kind of used sort of what the knowledge I have and replicated, and now I'm kind of realizing that once you put it out and you have those discussions, maybe I have to look into my professional practice. What kind of images am I selecting for what I'm communicating? But it's also the kind of the deeper learning is that once you start engaging in it, you have the social media, you have Twitter, blogs, and so on. You're also realizing that there is a risk that this operates very elite environments. Not just sort of north-south, because I think that's really an old-fashioned divide. But it involves an elite that is as present in some parts of Cape Town or Nairobi as it would be in London or Berlin or Malmö. But to have these kind of reflections, sort of starting with the practical exercise, then having group dynamics, the studio learning dynamics, to really move to some of these broader questions, I think really captures well how we combine sort of process and product approach into our broader ComDev pedagogy. And I'm now handing over to Anders, who has a very practical example that I think links well to what I just presented before we move on to the other presentations.
Okay, thank you very much, and good to be here. And I'm going to talk about a particular element, my lecture chat. In fact, our colleague Dollar here, Stefan, already talked about Seboka chat. So I'll talk about other things as well. I'll try to add several reflections, but it's quite simple. Here at first slide, you have a look screenshot. It doesn't reveal the camera so big, cameras and so forth. But you see the chat here, right? And also about presence, activity. So key points on the chat. Line controls presence, obviously, and there are these kind of different elements of different levels of learning engagement. This chat, this is quite important. It's worked quite well over the years, and of course it's a close list of students on the program page here, but I have guests. It's online aspects also increasingly set on page chat. And what is of course it's real time, as I said, it's silent, it's like to watch and listen from your patients somewhere out there, and you can also engage in actual conversation. So engage with online, engage with your fellow students, what is personal together in the same room. And there's also, I think, what kind of alley bridge to actual facilitation class through the dynamic facilitation. And we'll talk about that. First, a bit more about what's this chat. So, community. It's obviously building a community, it's not just chat, it's networking, hoping find themselves the same city or neighborhood online or and you share interests, make contact. And there's discussion relating to the lecture, question to the live lecture. Call it a parallel discussion, but a complementary conversation is the right term. It's silent without disturbing, set down side event spaces for learning as live lecture. So, and you see that in the chat develops quickly. It's kind of different levels, different knowledges are exposed at the same time. It's kind of islands, you can call it, but they are kind of intersecting and all in contact. That's a very important aspect that you have people all over the world share or who have different experiences. If they are professionals ready to learn and they bring in very important experience, and it's becomes visible in this chat, and it's kind of exchange. People don't know less, learn from students, share their ideas, their arguments, and so forth. And the academic lecture facilitator is on a hard job. We have 55, 40 people chat max a day. Because there are bits and pieces in multiple sentences, they can't be read or PowerPoint or so, and she will help clarifying under lecture. Fortunately, more and more students join the chat and help to presentation. Lecture facilitating that chat stands by and is available to you when there are questions. Patients with patients, as I said, but also importantly with discussion. So, the chat itself also by so forth later on for kind of revision learning. It's a history of questions and arguments. It draws upon this expertise of the students and it brings experience and viewpoints into the context of the lecture while judging this traditional class teaching, chat where arguments and exchange. So we have chat kind of very intense reality of words that extends what one brain does, per se. This kind of vivid, lively discussion space. There's also sometimes technical discussions, being picture, us students to see. And what we have more prepared the performances chat talk or questions. Facilitation is not quite busy. So I also students this facilitation and this issue of more intense chat also be problematic in terms of silencing quiet or not so chat types. And there are some tend to step on talk a lot. It should be good. There's some suggestions. And while we're getting bigger classes, it's also realized that of course wasn't to operate more sub chatting tasks than trying to make a lot. This part, but it's big. Okay. This was good.
I don't mind showing two things, so see how it works. Now, should we switch to the maybe like web page, the conference web page? On this one. Oh, no, this is. Okay. Already from the beginning, the library was invited to participate and take an active role in the conference. And this engagement has continued over the years. And I'm a liaison librarian, and I've been part of teaching since 2002. And I want to share some things I and my department of library information, library, IT services has done down the road. And maybe say something about future challenges and areas of I think it's great when the library can be integrated in the learning environment and take part of the interaction between teacher and students. And this triggers the development of the IT support services and library services. And you get a lot of feedbacks and flaws the IT and library service, but you also find out what's really working when you are participating closely teaching. And one of the things I've learned and really believe in is what's good for the onliners is good for everyone, for every student. This has a lot to do with getting access. The Global Classroom project aims at blending campus-based and distance education. And many of our campus students on university are commuting and are juggling the life jigsaw with family schemes. So they also combined being at the campus, being at home, doing the tasks. So having the information resources they need for their studies available online at their demand is something all students will benefit from. And students for programs like Conduct, they trigger us to develop these areas. And it's not only about getting access, but relying on a solid Swedish land-bound internet connection. It's also about getting access on the mobile programs, at the internet space, and wherever you are. And during the years we have identified hinders, eventually got an IT infrastructure that's more smooth. We are not requiring students to change passwords every 6 months. We did in the beginning, and that was horrible. We are getting closer to having the same verification level for almost all the systems that we use. For the libraries, e-resources, for the learning management systems, and for the printing systems and all the things. Well, we've heard about this. Another thing I've learned has to do about wayfinding. It's about finding one's way to the library's resources and finding out how and when to use them. And I think a good library web is useful to all students off or on campus. This is our library website. the way it looks now. Just scroll down. And as you can see, we work quite a lot with images and short texts and a few navigation bars. We have the tweets, we have the chat, and we have some other things, renovations going on it. In the communication development course, when I participated as a librarian, we tried different ways of displaying the library's information resources, helping the students to be aware of the information seeking process. In the beginning, we had seminars on information literacy. Because back in the 2002, 2003, 2004, the internet was a big, scary thing, and there were lots of hidden things that you don't need special skills to know how to find. And we talk a lot about search techniques and, yeah, what is information literacy, what we need to know. Now, this is not really the topic anymore. We also had an idea of building a web directory for communication for development web page, and we also tried to create course-specific library pages for the different small modules in the course. But at the moment, I strongly believe that we should focus on making the general library web page as inspiring and easy to use, so all students can find what they need. But at the same time, I need to give the Comdev students a special personal landing page with the most important information, especially when they're new ones. So you could put on the other website. Oh, there. So this is something I use just for the new students. Lots of contact information, the most important information about getting access. That's where everybody had problems before, and how to find the ebooks common. That's really important thing as well. And during the years, I've also learned the importance of the personal contact, to be representing the library, and maybe connect with the students at the seminars when needed, when they're new or when they're writing their development project. So I give short presentations on seeking info on the seminars, just in time with time for questions, to making sure the students are aware of the wide variety of information resources that we have, and encourage them to get acquainted with the scholarly journals and the database system more, so they can use it when they need it. And this will add to the findings that they already found on the internet. So it's important to make them feel that they're part of the library and it's a place for them to come and ask questions and get help. And as being a liaison librarian, it's like being the first line of the IT support. You get info on what's not working, and when the question stops coming, you know it's probably working. What's on for the future? My experience is that there is an increased use of and an interest for journal articles from the Comdev students. It can be a variety of reasons. I think it's reflecting the staff's focus, and it's also reflecting the shift in the humanities and social sciences from books to journals. And also, it's so much easier to get access to journal articles than to books. Ebooks, really good, but it's still a limited amount that meets the requirements of verification and multi-user access, which is something we want from the library in order to get it working for students. The options to download the books for longer time interval is of course very rare. But we are working with new acquisition models, patron-driven acquisition and so on, and hopefully it will get easier to use, and the DRM protection problems will be solved. Another thing that we are working with now is, before Google Scholar used to be the heaven for interdisciplinary fields of communication for development, and it's recently been challenged at our university by the discovery systems that we're using. We're using Summon by Crocus, but there are also others out there, and it will be really interesting to follow how this, if we can see a change of what the students are using and what will be the starting points for getting access. And within the Global Classroom project, I hope I can exchange experiences and learn more about how you are working with providing the students with access to resources that they need during this year. So that's my focus in the program. And tomorrow on Thursday I meet with the Stellenbosch University Library, and hopefully we can create a track, a library track within. Thank you.
Were the last ones. Our big task now will be to give an insight in how it actually feels for students to study a course like ComDev. In my case, it was 100% distance learning. I live in Mozambique. I've worked in development for the last 5 years, and after like 2 years, I felt I want to start studying again to get a theoretical reflection of what I experienced in the field. So I did a research on what possibilities there were, and the most distance learning programs I found were based on, okay, you get the material in advance, you study it, and then you take a test. And that was it. And I'm like, okay, this is not what I want. I really want this shared learning experience, and this is what convinced me when I found ComDev. Distance learning is really demanding a high degree of self-motivation, and I still was, I decided to study ComDev, but I was afraid of being on my own. But after the first semester, I was quite happy with the course, because the virtual classroom really is offering a shared experience for the students. Do you want to say something about yourself, your background?
Yeah, I, as Oscar mentioned, joined the program first 2009. And actually, from the start, I was interested in the subject itself, because I've been working as a communication officer in the development area, living in Seboka, working for SIDA 10 years ago by now. So I wanted to get back into the field. And at the time, I also had moved to Malmö, actually, from Stockholm, so that intrigued me. But as I started, I actually found that the actual course technique with the online technique was actually as interesting as the subject ComDev itself. Just as was mentioned, also as a communication officer, I've been working professionally all the way, which also made me stop for a while with the studies, because I had too much work. But it also helped me in my professional work, because if you work for a company or an organization, these are the techniques you need also to use as a communication officer. So it's double advantage, so to say, someone like me.
Yeah, I forgot to say that for me it was also totally new territory to study distance, course via distance learning, because my first degree I took was 15 years ago in Vienna, a very traditional university. It was all based on physical contact. It was very innovative to write an email to a professor at that time. It was, So yeah, I was quite excited to how it was going to be. And as Ulrika said, studying ComDev was not only interesting because of the thematic focus, but the whole distance learning experience. I learned so much about that, and I think it's an extra value that is very, very important. So I wanted to point out the main aspects for these 2 years of taking the course in my experience. And the first one, it's learning. I think nobody has said anything about that yet, but maybe Mickey will. That for me was like the physical home of the course, and which gave the structure, the physical structure, if you want to say. You have the timeline there of each semester, you have the literature, you have the different forums, so this is like home base. And then live lecture, we've heard about that, which is like the combination of the video chat and the written chat. This is, for me, it was like the core, the whole course. And whenever I logged into a seminar, to live lecture, it's like, I'm going to be there now with all the other students. I'm going to meet my professors. And I really enjoyed that because it's like, meeting and exchanging with the others. And then it's especially important is what Anders already talked about. It's a moderated discussion. And you learn so much, not only by listening to the lecture, but through what the others say, and then what the moderator, the input he gives. Especially Anders was very good and immediately linking us with some sites on the internet, and it's a very active listening. So
can I comment on
yes,
that part? Because I totally agree that it's so great that there are two parallel discussions sometimes going on, where you have the live lecture going on and questions being posed there. Because I obviously, since I live in Malmö, participate live at the seminars as much as I can. But I'm also online, either in the physical classroom, but I've also, since I have children at home, and the weekend seminars, sometimes I had to be at home in the morning, and then I biked to the university and continued physically. So sort of, it's strange somehow. It's sometimes a little bit confusing as well, because you end up in discussions that don't have to do with the lecture. So.
Yeah, that's true. What is a crucial feature of the live lecture, thanks to Mieke, I thought it was normal, but apparently it's not. To have 3 different qualities of the live stream. And for me, being in northern Mozambique, it was crucial to have the opportunity to use the lowest quality stream. Sometimes I tried to use the higher, but impossible. And today we heard a lot about Google Hangouts, and we tried that. I tried that, and it never worked. I mean, there really are still some limits if you don't have the best internet. So the options we have at ComDev with 3 different qualities is a very important feature. Yeah, then third, of course, Skype. Skype I used for the more personal exchange, either between me and my tutor, professor, or between the students when we had group works, for example. So, and we saw that with that examination seminar, it's always also linked to live lecture, or sometimes, like, depending on what works best. So you have a combination of the different media. I used it in my research for my degree project to do the interviews. So Skype is very important. And fourth, of course, Facebook and email for additional contact between the students or the tutors, and also for a more informal way of communicating. You want to say something on that? Then I used, we were made to try out YouTube and blogging. That was less as part of the communication used for the course, but we were made to use it to try it out for assignments, to use these media for building a communication, elaborating a communication product. That was actually a course held by Mieke. So we tried that out, and I liked that a lot. So Summing up, like these 5 points I mentioned, what I felt is that I used during these 2 years a lot of different media, always looking for the most adequate for each activity. So it's quite diverse, and also that's why it's also very interesting and enriching. Now we would come to the difficulties. I don't want to be too critical, but for me it was still quite a challenge sometimes to get the books. I mean, really, in Mozambique, you totally depend on what you get online. So that was sometimes quite a challenge. But I also recognize that it's getting better since when I started 2 years ago until now. This was...
Yeah. Exactly. On social media, yeah, I think you mentioned already. Since when I joined first in 2009 and now rejoined in January 2014, I mean, only those 4 years. A lot has happened in the social media area. So it is, in a way, just in these few years, the course has changed. So I'm really happy I did it twice, sort of, because, well, first of all, you get to know more people, because that is, as Anders said, a great experience in this course, that you meet so many interesting people all over the world, whether it's Austrian in Mozambique or Zambian in London, or who have great experience. So that's such a good network to have. And also on the social media side, it gives so much more possibilities now than only 4 years ago. Also, we just did a group assignment now here in March, February, March, and using It's Learning as a home base, but then definitely use Dropbox a lot to sort of post our writings and joint postings. Skype definitely was also a major part of it. Facebook, we realized, was not so good for our group because we had a student in China. Facebook not allowed in China. Another one in Vietnam. Facebook is not, a little bit allowed, but not really. So it was interesting to see sort of what works on a global scale as well. So maybe that's also a future challenge, to really get the social media into It's Learning, or so that you can follow it easier also for you as teachers to see what we are doing, because it's actually, we're doing more than you probably see, interacting with each other. Mika sees everything, okay. He is our personal Google. Yes, bringing...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was already said, but especially in the content context, for me, it makes sense to bring all these people from all over the world together. It's a different experiences. Yeah, I wanted to say something about how I experienced this local experience. And the way I see it is that, I mean, when I studied these 2 years, almost like there are people everywhere in the world, and most of them working, studying besides work. But it's so interesting what everybody brings into the course from their very specific local context. And then you like lift it up to this theoretical reflection, made by the tutors. Then you immediately take it back to your very local context again. So it's a constant exchange between the local and the global context. It helps. And it's, yeah, very enriching. Give some.
Yes. Yeah, on the flexibility side, we already mentioned that it really enables, first, of course, globally, wherever you are in the world, but also as Linda mentioned, also with your other lifestyle. I know in Sweden and Swedish universities, lifelong learning is an expression that you're not only a student when you are in your 20s, that you actually have a second career maybe and go back to studying, or you want to go in depth, and kind of online learning makes this possible with your maybe other life with family or work on the side. So that's probably something that other courses also could benefit from. Yeah, another experience. It is important to have an easy interface, just as someone here from Stellenbosch, yeah, you mentioned it before, and also making it interesting, so it's not so complicated. And especially if you're working or doing other things besides studying, you can't get into it very, very deep and get to know it. So it has to be simple, and as simple as Facebook or whatever, Twitter. And yeah, oh yeah, the last part, not to mention, since I've been able to be there physical as well. I think physical seminars are still very, very important. Actually, you won't meet everyone, but at least you will meet some fellow students. And so I think it is still a complement to the physical meet. Thank you. So far.
Yes, just a comment to that. We're fearing the moment when we will have no students present in the room, because then we'll have to rethink the whole idea of the seminar. We managed to have the attendance. So, Micke, you have the last word.
See if we can get these two. I need mine.
Yeah.
No, let's go to mine. Oh, you can take them. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I'm making one back. Forgot to mention my name. I'm nervous because I'm not so happy to be here in front of you. I kind of like to be behind the camera instead. I'm the camera guy. Let's see if I can get my presentation up here. Help me to. So let's start here, and our beautiful students said that I can bring up directly, and that's the physical part. And I'm going to concentrate on telling the story, how to mediate the physical room, because that is one part that we do. In that meaning, I mean how to webcast. This picture here comes from one of our online seminars, and it's a little bit blurry, but you can see a panel, and you can see Anna, one of our teachers in Malmö, sitting there. This picture doesn't exist in the real world. It's a combined picture with the help of a video mixer, switcher, and 2 camera technology. And we work a lot with this type of pictures when we webcast our seminars. And what comes out of this picture is actually quite much, which is good for learning, for the learning situation. It's not only a talking head that we are showing. We are also showing what's going on between the speaker and the listener, in a way. And we work a lot with these kinds of situations. From my point of view, I call it a dialogue-based storytelling, actually. Okay. I'm going to see if. Yeah, I know. I do need to do both because I need to have my notes here. So here is a little bit more of pictures from.
I'm going to be quite practical in a moment. Actually, talking about cameras, how to set it up to create this virtual. Here are some pictures from our seminars. First of all, how do we know these seminars work? They are 2 to 3 days long, and many of our students actually follow them all day, and from early morning from to late evening, and many days in a row. And we know that by seeing the chat and seeing the presence in the present. But from my point of view, I was wondering, how do they stand being online for 2 years? Even if we are pretty interesting. I mean, the lectures in Comlab are really, really but what makes them sit to watch this small video image, which if you use the low bandwidth setting, which Barbara is using, is 50 kilobits. It's a blocky image with quite blurry sound. What makes her sit there and watch for 3 days? And I was thinking on what we actually do that differs a little bit what that to other mediated conferences is. And that's the dynamic picture language that we use. So here's a little bit, here's a couple of pictures from live webcast actually. And it's a little bit blurry, but I can say this is the classical speaker, Jan Edvin. It's a beautiful speaker. It's really fast. But this is the talking hand picture that we normally see when we enter a virtual classroom. Down here is a new combined picture, actually, with Jan speaking to the audience. Here's the same picture in the middle from the same lecture. And we do like that. We're switching pictures all the time, trying to give them an experience that is pretty much like a TV production. Except that we also add this trying to focus on the dialogue between the listener and the speaker all the time. So what you don't do so much in TV production is this kinds of double video shots. What more, we also have quite common situations when we have a small picture here. I got better ones further down my presentation. Yes, a video conference coming into the room together with Oscar sitting in one. And instead, and this is a really early one, we are not bothering to connect those two systems in one system. We are just actually filming the screen of the video conference in a way. And what's good about that is that there is an interaction between Oscar and one of our teachers, the small head in the background now, which is I forgot the name now. Sorry, Julia, yeah, sitting in another place in Sweden. So they are in the video conference. So I just remediate the video conference in the room. Instead of trying to get them into one system, I just did. And it works quite simply. And that's things that we have learned. I call it street. We are combining different systems all the time, not trying to be complicated. And we are using the room as the base for the production all the time. This one here is a workshop where we did a 3 days workshop in theater group workshop, where they actually had stage play, where 4 students came into the room by video conferences, played together with the students in the room, and then mediated through a second system live stream. And that was quite an interesting experience. But also, in that case, we took the stand from the physical room instead of the system. Oh, okay. The last one down there is how we try to make the pictures. That is a chroma key picture with the speaker in front of her presentation. We are doing lots of that also. Let's. So yeah, this is the talking head dials. Okay. So we are trying to create this dynamic rich video language. And the aim is to create an interesting virtual social room that supports a form of multimodal interacting. But actually, the multimodal thing is when we try to give the students online a feeling of being present in the room, and then they speak back not in video, they're speaking back text, and that, I mean, that's a way to solve many synchronizing problems that comes along with video. We have seen a couple here when we are going to switch to speak. It always takes a long time. But the focus is in the video production is to try to create this collaborative space, and that emerges from the video production. More pictures. So here's the normal shot, and this is to combine two video shots. And here's the second, where I have a camera facing the audience. And actually, to be able to combine and create this kind of images is one of the issues. I also can apply graphics models very easily. And instead of just showing the cast and talk for 1.5 hours, I also show the people receiving. More of those, yeah. This one was better. I tried to, yeah, because I played before actually. So switching between all of those pictures is important to keep the concentration level up high, and also give them a feeling of being there, moving around in the room, seeing things. What we also think of is that when we then, after a while, we can publish this. I mean, this is streamed live, and then it's saved on the net directly. But it also is another picture of things in the room. So the students that actually participated in a room have a possibility to see themselves in a three-person perspective, in a way, but also see pictures that are never been seen. So there is a value going back these videos, even if you have joined live in the room. So we are adding more content to the seminar, actually, by using this multi-camera technology. Here are more studio pictures. And we like to work with green screen, because then we can change the content behind the speaker very dynamically. And it improves the quality of the video a lot. So we also always try to keep the speaker in the picture together with the slides. And it's giving you a lot of presentation also if you get this seamless thing when the speaker's standing in front of the presentation. And that is totally constructed picture. It doesn't exist in work, in the real world. We could put anything behind the speaker, because what we're showing there is just a computer picture that we screen in. So it could be a video conference, for example, in this case. So here's a Skype call And the Skype call is totally separated from the streaming system, actually. So the Skype call is going to a computer where our student meet Tobias face to face, instead of seeing himself. Um, um, yeah, instead of seeing this picture, he sees they are in a face-to-face situation. And then we top up with a video stream on this, where we can insert the Skype call into the physical group. So in a way, there is two pictures from this. There is the personal communication between Tobias and the student. Sarah, yeah. In the same minute, there is also the third person when you can watch it as an audience. And that's nothing odd with that, but it's a great value of Sada, because he can go back and watch his video from a third-person view, see him himself talk, see him himself in a dialogue together with Tobias. This is one of the effects that you get when you combine different systems, separates the system, and then film. One, two computers. Here are more pedagogical situations that we use this studio-like thing. And I'm going to talk through it. It's an explanation, actually. This is the first picture that we stream out with the students talking together with her presentation. The next step in the examination is when students are getting feedback from another student. And then this is all in the same room. So okay. So, and this is also a combination where we actually make the room smaller by using two cameras. So what's going on between the students here, it's when we webcast it, we actually make the room a little bit smaller, so it fits the video image. The next step is when Ylva, who is the examiner, gives her feedback on to the examiner by video conference. So that's a combination between this is room, and that's a video conference and room. And here's a picture of how it looks when the student is getting her feedback face to face from Ylva. So this is the room. And here's the second camera, which is behind. It is showing the whole classroom. So actually we've got 4 cameras in action here. And everything is done with a very small, totally desktop-based video switcher called Wi-Fi. And I also place the switching board in close contact with the room. So here's next to in the middle of the room, actually, more or less, I placed the video production, because that also gives me a better sense of using the cameras, which are covering all the room. Another thing with placing the camera and the switchboard in the middle of the room is that people start to interact with the camera. Actually, I normally say that think on that the onliners are in the camera, so they actually turn to the camera and talk when they are addressing students outside the room. That's really, really important thing. I never look at the camera here. I look at you, but I have the function. Giving the online expression that I actually look at the same time I look at you. So it's a question of about designing the room in a clever way. So here's our conclusion then, a little bit of this kind of mediator room. The dialogue-based and rich visual language-based coherence and social atmosphere to the video. And it also gives the possibility to have this interactive, interactively creates. Yeah, well, since people actually can interact with the cameras, the students out there also have a feeling of being there. The camera is an interactive tool rather than just an observer, I would say, because there's people in the camera, actually. The lens is the eye of the oh, finished. Oh, I'm done.
Thank you, Michael. I think this has been quite a comprehensive presentation. Stimulated a few thoughts in my mind. And I'm sure there's some questions in the audience as well. Maybe I can start off with a question, Linda. Can I pitch it at you? You mentioned the challenges you've still got with e-books and classroom content, and I think one of the students also mentioned that this was one of the challenges of getting access to that. Have you got any view on open education resources versus proprietary information? And I think we've got the same challenge in South Africa in terms of digital rights management. Who's responsible for the procurement of those textbooks? And how do you balance it with open education resources, especially from a library environment?
That's a big question. But I think the students are using a mixture of what they can find online, open education resources, books, part of books being available on Google Books, and then I don't really know what they're doing when I'm not looking. But
can I maybe be more specific? Do you actually buy books for the students and register from the university point of view?
From the libraries, we can only support the students of the communication for development course with the services that we have. We have no special services. So what I can do is copy chapters, but send by email, because then I think I'm quick. We try to get, we always check if we can back and get the books on the literature list as e-books via our providers, and sometimes it's the case, it's getting better and better. Yes, I think also we need to maybe rethink what kind of literature we're using. Is textbooks the literature for this kind of courses? Are there additional texts? I have experience for problem-based learning where you don't have a literature list, you just have suggested readings, and I think that solves quite a lot of these problems, because you can find other text from the author, or you can find text on the subjects and use that, and you're not being examined on the text. And I think that's where I want to go, from my perspective. But the communication for development course has been quite heavily based on books, but I think it's changing. And also, and that's a problem that we've noticed. And also, ebooks are fine, but if you're not able to download it and can only read it online, then it doesn't really help all of our students. So that's also something to.
to address.
But I think there's lots of
Okay.
things outside, and I focused in the last years. I focused on trying to make the students aware of what we have at the library, as that is licensed, locked with the analysis. The other things I think they'll find.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more?
I would like to the teaching perspective, because I think that's kind of maybe Linda to some extent has a couple of years. But no, I'm not doing anything illegal, obviously. I'm there on camera anyway. No, but I think the real challenge is I want students to read, and I have to stretch the boundaries as far as possible to make that happen. So, for example, if you would say, well, you can't, now it's learning platform, you can't post, a PDF file, and you can say, this is the link, go to the university website, download the article from this and this, it doesn't happen. So, if I have 3 articles that students are supposed to read, PDFs are available to the students. Otherwise, the students are not going to read them, and everybody loses out. And it's not just about, obviously, students have the literacy. They could go to the website. It's not exactly rocket. But I'm also, I think from a teaching and researcher's perspective, I'm always kind of trying to push the boundaries of what is legally possible with copyright as far as possible. And and if it's about a book chapter, if a student says I need a book chapter, book is not available online, Routledge has some idea that they need to charge £80 for this, and I have access to it, I'm copying 1 or 2 chapters, which is perfectly within, whether it should be a PDF or not is a question. But I'm really trying to push this as much as possible, because the interesting thing is the students, they don't read. That's the thing. There's always this. We want books, we want the resources. When you actually look at the reading, so you need to push students, and you need to have those. You need to level it as easy as possible. And it's really, I guess, about technology. If technology is so complicated, you lose people on the way. And it is really. It may sound rough, but it is. And I think today's blog presentation was really interesting. You are competing with a lot of other things. And if a student sees a 5-minute YouTube video or a TED Talk, which are solving all the problems in education, apparently. So if there is an issue between I need to download 2 articles from a journal, or I can watch a 50-minute TED Talk, that's what I'm competing against. But then I really have to say, this PDF, go and read it. So that's really a challenge. Where teaching and library need to work together, and I think Melinda's doing an excellent job. With adding resources and adding ebooks, and we work within what's possible.
No, thank you very much for that comment. Questions from the floor? Okay, thank you.
Good day, I'm Andrew Fair from the Stellenbosch University at the Center for Pedagogy. I've got 1 or 2 questions. The first one to Oscar. You mentioned in the opening slide that the presence in the room is so important. If you could elaborate on that. You also mentioned a bit later that you're getting to a point where maybe you lose all those students in the room. If you could just elaborate on why that's so important to have students there with you while you present.
Well, we do actually lectures without an audience as well. But for the seminars, that has from the start somehow been the core of the program to have these, and I think it was very well explained by our students and by their experiences of it, that the live lecture, they are actually these are the moments when of presence, and that presence is very much created by the actual physical presence and the interaction between those who are in the room and those who are online. I think that there are many levels, very interesting levels of communication, especially now when actually, I would say perhaps even most of the students in the room are also connected on their laptops. So they are, while being in the room and listening to the lecture, they can also communicate with those online. I think that it would be difficult to create that kind of very creative environment if you didn't have the very simple group dynamic that you get by having at least 10 people in the room. And we can see that if at times we have had seminars where we have had fewer people, and then you don't get that the kind of energy or synergy, if you like, that you get when you have it. I mean, really in terms of this convergence and blended learning, which really builds on this combination of the two. So, I mean, the moment if we were to have that moment one day, and it could be, I mean, for many years we were talking about what would happen when we had the first student who never sets foot in Malmö. That happened sometime in 2007, I think, and now it's quite normal that many of our students, like Barbara, I don't think you've ever been to, not well, Barbara has at least never attended any of the seminars, and that I think that's normal for the most part. But still, she has attended online. So and I think that was very well described by you. And I think that's what I think I see that really as an achievement that we have managed to create this the possibility to actually feel that you are somehow present when you are in Northern Mozambique. So, but I mean, if the situation occurs when we have difficulties getting someone to attend, then we'll have to rethink our pedagogy. But we're working hard to keep this kind of dynamic.
That's a very brief point. I mean, also when we have these 2-3 day seminars, there are a dinner, there are beers, a drink, people get together and chat until 2 in the morning. You can't really get that in live lecture chat, so that's also another initiative to reason to come to the seminars.
And that's been an extremely good time to end, emphasizing the drinks and the variety. Thank you, Oscar, for your team. I think you made us think. I think that it sets a good platform for discussions even tonight. So thank you very much to you. Okay, so I think I'm being assessed by my time management, and look at the clock. I think there's 1 minute left. So that 1 minute we'll spend just to make sure. Are there any questions about the event tonight? Are you all informed? Okay. Any other questions that's of urgent need? Okay, thank you very much, and we'll all see you at the braai. Thank you very much.